Hey everyone, what's up? If you're watching this video, you're probably curious how to get a head start early in your career. I'm not going to talk about how I use drop shipping or some social media influencing opportunity to make a ton of money early in my career. This is 100% from a W-2. So if you're curious about how to get into sales, recruiting or something to make a lot of money, that's what this video is for you. Now, when I was graduating college, my first full year out, I made $63,000. That was 2019. In 2020, I W-2'd $134,000. And in 2021, I W-2'd just over $220,000. In this video, I'm gonna give you a couple tips and tricks on how to get there. And at the end, I'll point out a couple important things to avoid. Now, tip number one is you have to find a role where you can control a portion of your income. For me, it was sales. I know other people where for them it was recruiting and they were getting paid based off the number of recruits that they were in. Because my experience is largely sales, I'm gonna talk mostly about that in this video. So in a role where you control your income like sales, you're either gonna be in a 1099, which is commission only. That is a grind. And most of the time, those roles are 1099 only because there's a lot of turnover in those roles. There's a lot of underperformers, and then there's a lot of performers at the very top. So by paying 1099, they kind of weed out the people that don't just commit everything to it. That's not the right role for a lot of people after college because normally they need some type of cash flow consistently coming in. I was in a W-2 role. A lot of W-2 roles, you have a base salary plus a commission. In sales roles, your base salary could be anywhere from $40,000 to $100,000 plus, and then your commission will hopefully double whatever your base salary was, if not more. But finding a sales role isn't it. There's a lot of salespeople out there that make 80 grand or 120, 150, which are still great numbers, but we want to get to that 200 plus or even higher range. I mean, I know sales reps that have made 7 figures in a year. So that means tip number 2, if getting into a role where we control our income is important, well, what type of companies should those roles be at? This is incredibly important. You want to find yourself at a seed stage company or maybe a Series A company. The reason for this, if you are early in your career, is because you want to find yourself at a company where internal promotions can get you to the sales roles that are incredibly high paying, your enterprise account executives or like senior sales managers. For me, I found myself at a company that was doing just under $1 million in annual revenue when I joined. So really the seed stage, your valuation might be anywhere from $5 to $15 million. Nowadays that can even mean pre-seed, but you want to get to a company where they have established a little bit of a product market fit. They're starting to get some inbound leads coming in. So there's a couple questions to ask and things to look out for in these seed stage companies. Ask what their sales team looks like today. How many sales reps do they have? Are you going to be their first SDR or BDR, which can actually be a great opportunity? How many leads are coming in? How many contracts do they have closed? Like how many customers do they have? The reason that we want to ask some of these things around pipeline and customers is to establish that this is going to be a company that is going to grow. Like for how many leads that come in, what percentage of those do they close? For every contract that they send out, how many actually get signed and turned into customers? For the customers they do have, how many have left within a year? These are important things to understand that, hey, if I join this company in 3 years, they're still gonna be around and I can be crushing it, or are they gonna be shutting down in the next 6 months and you have to go find a new role? So we want to find ourselves in a role where we control our income, and we want to find ourselves in a company where we know they're going to be lasting, but they are quite new at that seed or maybe Series A stage. Now for me, I started out as that BDR, SDR, the very entry-level sales rep, and if you're coming out of college, that's where a lot of you who are watching will be finding yourself too. This is the cold call, cold email, setting up meetings for more senior salespeople role comes into play. there's a couple things that you can do to set yourself apart at this stage. The BDR SDR role is a great time to learn more about the product and the industry. I was an intern in digital marketing and luxury skincare when I graduated college. Not really a great transition to health tech, where I found myself just 4 months after that internship. And so work ethic is going to be great for a BDR and SDR. That shows you're putting in the grind to become the account executive, but spending time learning more about the industry is really important. So I was doing things like signing up for newsletters. In healthcare, there's Becker's, there's His Talk, there's like 12 different Becker's newsletters you can subscribe to, and a ton of others. The other thing is LinkedIn. If you are in a B2B market, LinkedIn is a great opportunity to connect with executives and thought leaders in the space to see what they are saying. To be able to talk the talk as a salesperson is really important. So the other part of talking the talk is being able to talk the talk with prospects about your product. So sit in with account executives to learn how they are pitching the product, but also to hear what prospects are saying. So oftentimes when I see advice given to BDRs, it's, hey, set the meeting for your account executive and then go watch how that next meeting takes place. But that's really not enough. You really need to be there for the negotiations, the objections that come through along the way, the more in-depth workflow discussions, because this is where you're really going to get the gold around what benefits your prospects are looking for, what the key areas of your product are that solve those things. And by understanding the benefits of the decision makers, you're really going to start to understand what features of your product set yourself apart versus the ones that are more of a commodity in your space. Because if you start to try to sell on the things where your product's really just a commodity, it's going to be really tough to win business. Now, I was in the BDR SDR role for about 8 months. Then I was transitioned into more of the SMB Account Executive role, and I was there for about 9 months. This is a role where you want to spend a lot of time really getting the benefit of working on a lot of deals. A small business account executive might be working and trying to close anywhere from like 5 to 15 deals a month, whereas an enterprise salesperson might not even close a deal every month. And so that gives the SMB account executive a lot of unique opportunity to talk to a lot of different types of decision makers at the same time. So you'll start to learn the personalities and personas really well. If the decision maker is more of an IT background, more of a finance background, more of an operations background, really hone in on your skill set talking to these different persona types and being able to understand, all right, if I'm talking to a finance type of decision maker, these are the benefits and features of the product that I want to make sure I get across. And that's going to be different than someone with an IT background. Now, these SMB account executives, you're going to make anywhere from a $40,000 to $75,000 base, and maybe a commission structure that'll be an extra 50 to 100% on top of that. You're probably going to be somewhere in the middle of that range, anywhere from $50,000 to $60,000 base, and making 80 to 100, maybe 120 at some businesses, depending on their profit margin. Now, from there, you go from an SMB to most likely a mid-market account executive. Here, your deal sizes get a little bit bigger. You're going to go from closing deals that are maybe $5,000 to $20,000 to $20,000 to $50,000, maybe even up to $100,000, depending on the company. These mid-market account executives make anywhere from a $60,000 to $70,000 base up to $100,000 base, but that's again still probably on the high side. Pretty rare for a mid-market AE to have a base that high. Now here you are going to work with a more complex buyer. You might have a panel of anywhere from 2 to 8 decision makers. You're likely going to have a finance, IT, operations executives all in on the purchase decision, rather than just talking to the decision maker directly at an SMB sale. That's a big difference going from SMB sales and higher. We'll talk more about these differences maybe in another video, but that's one of them. So then to get into the enterprise sales, that's where you're working on huge deals, 6 figures plus per year. When I was in the middle of the pandemic, I had gotten a promotion that took me from a $75,000 base up to a $100,000 base. I moved into the enterprise space and I was working on 2 of the biggest deals I ever have. They both happened to close in the same month. And the way that our commission structure worked was the more you closed in a month, the more percentage of the contract value you got. So in this month, I made $70,000 in commission. And so that, with my $100,000 base, by the time it was the end of May, my W-2 was already about $150,000. And I had moved into a new job just a month or 2 later where my base was a little bit higher than 100,000. Wasn't really earning much commission because I was just getting into the role. And so in 2021, I ended up at about $220,000 in W-2. So a couple of things that you're gonna want to avoid to get a much higher earning potential earlier in your sales career. There are gonna be trade-offs here I'll talk about too. My story is a very early stage startup, very entry-level role, worked my way up as the company grew. This is what you're gonna have to do in order to find yourself in manager, director type roles, making 150, 200,000 plus at the age of 22, 23, 24. And the reason for this is it gives you the opportunity to grow with the company. When I was a entry-level SDR, I was employee like 15 at this company. By the time I was an enterprise level account executive, I think we had 50 or 60 employees, and we hired another 20 just over my first couple months in that role. And so because you're doing all of that hiring, it's very easy to promote from within. Now, contrary to that, think about companies with some of the best well-known sales organizations today. Maybe it's ADP or Salesforce, LinkedIn, HubSpot. Great organizations. A lot of them have great sales training programs, but if you enter Salesforce as a sales development representative, you're probably going to be in that role 12 to 24 months. Then you're going to move into an SMB Account Executive role, maybe an SDR manager, but it's going to take you probably 5 to 10 years to get into that enterprise level sales role. Now at Salesforce, you can make a lot of money because those are big contracts. So even their mid-market level account executives are probably making over $200,000 a year for the top performers. So it might take you a little bit longer, but you are selling a product that you know people are buying. And so that's one of the trade-offs of going to a seed stage or Series A startup. You really don't know how the company is going to perform over the next several years. So if you end up picking the wrong seed stage startup, you might find yourself on a company that's shutting down in 6 to 12 months. The other thing is a seed stage startup isn't going to have a great training program. Whereas if you go to somebody like Salesforce, they've trained hundreds and hundreds of reps through a proven program. They know how to sell their product, and they know a lot of the great sales 101 and 301 things to get you moving on in your career. Now, that can be really helpful because if you do go to a company like a Salesforce or a HubSpot, other companies know you're getting this stellar training. So when you're ready to move on to company number 2 in your career, you are a very attractive candidate because they know you're coming in, the rust has been, dusted off, you've got the skills, you know how to manage complex organizations in the sales process. As a startup, you're probably going to be a little bit more raw. People are probably going to think you have more hustle, but you're not going to be as fine-tuned and clean until that startup becomes a very well-known company at a Series C, D, or IPO stage where it's like, all right, this company is no longer really a startup. So here's a couple things that you can do earlier in your career to really advance your earning potential by the time you're just 23, 24, 25 in sales.